Howdy peeps, and welcome back to the channel. Today we have another kit review. This time it's not a new kit, let's be honest, but it's something that is pretty much under try and figure out my words here. Yeah, I can't no, my brain's not working properly at the moment. What I'm trying to say is there aren't enough examples of models of this particular vehicle out there. It's iconic, it's awesome, and a lot of people don't know what one is. This is the Special Hobby 132 X15A2 with the ground dolly. It was at the time the fastest plane ever built, or fastest flying thing ever built, aside from space rockets. It flew at stupid speeds, at stupid altitudes. I think it was recorded something like 4,520 miles an hour, which is max something, I think it's max 7 point something or 6 point something. It's somewhere around there. It's ludicrously fast. It was pretty much a NASA test bed for things like the Space Shuttle, the Blackbird, all that kind of good stuff. So, typical Special Hobby kit. So let's get a look in the box and see what we find. Now, for one, I'm going to say, unlike the BF109, the Tamiya I reviewed the other week, it'll probably be a week by the time, or probably be a couple of weeks by the time this one goes up in comparison to the Tamiya BF109. This one is certainly not going to fit together as well. The box lid fits fairly well, that's usually a good start. But you do get a lot of extras in the box. And we'll start with the first sprue. Hopefully doesn't have a name or a number. Oh, sprue A. Well, there we go. And this is the front half of the fuselage. Now, yeah, in 132 she's a big old lump. I will zoom you in a little, just for about cutting that size. You may be able to make out you've got all the recessed panel lines covering the airframe, top and bottom, a little bit of flash, to be expected. It's a Special Hobby kit. They're basically a short run kit that aren't that short a run, so the moulding process or the machines aren't necessarily that great, or the moulds themselves maybe. We have the front landing gear and the wheels. This thing doesn't have any rear landing gear. It came down and basically had a skid, which is why this one comes with the dolly. It didn't actually take off either. It was launched from, I think, B-52, something like that. Basically carried up there like a rocket or a missile and then just dropped. Nothing much on the inside. A few ejector pin stubs that might need to be cleaned up, but I think the cockpit is fairly flush and fills that entire area, so it's not going to be a problem. Same with the wheel wells, or the wheel well. So if I bring it up closer, it should focus on the plastic. You can see the panel lines and the various surface details, as long as I can catch it right in the light. And they don't fade off down the sides, which is always a good sign. And it's looking rather tasty so far. And yes, I'm doing my usual thing of putting all the bits back in the lid. There's not a huge amount of plastic to this kit, it has to be said. Here's the back parts of the fuselage. We've got the same recessed panel lines and rivets. Got a bit of a ding there, but we can soon sand that out. And down the sides here we've got, if you can't see it, you'll be able to hear it, a kind of stressed skin effect where the panels are rippled. Now that is on purpose, that's not just because the moulds had it. Now I'm not entirely sure, but I think that might have been with the real plane, obviously the speed it was going at with the temperature, things would expand, so they may have well put the ripples in there on purpose so that as stuff expands and contracts you don't end up with massive panel gaps and then things getting ripped off. But again, it's the same levels of detail top and bottom, and we can see where the fin is going to sit. We have on here a few more pieces which I'm not entirely sure what they are. And that is the surround for the rocket engine at the back. Nice raised detail, rivets, everything on there. Oh, it looks good. And we've got the same mess on the inside of the mould, but you know, that doesn't really matter too much. Is that where that... no. Gets stuck together. None of that's going to be visible anyway, so that's okay, it's not a problem. As you can see, I mean, it's going to be a big old lump. It's going to be a couple of foot long, or 60 centimetres if you're metric. And then the next bag contains all the rest of the sprues, pretty much. So we start with the wings and tail. Not really a lot to say about the wings because they're a dinky tiny thing. This is basically a missile with a man in it. A steerable missile, pretty much. But again, we've got the same levels of panel lines, all nice and crisp. Not too shallow. And there's going to be a lot of clean up on these to get rid of the ejector pin stubs so that the parts all fit together nice and snug. But that's just a quick clip and a bit of a sand, that's not a problem. And yeah, those parts are looking fairly good. As I say, it is a special hobby kit. Those are the kind of things you're going to get. Don't expect perfect fit. Don't expect totes amazeballs engineering, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to figure out which side is the front side of this sprue. Guessing this side. Mainly because it just has the E stamped into the mould there. This is just pretty much bits. We have the seat, back and bottom. Probably the cockpit floor and back. Just various other little bits, none of which really are obvious. Quite a few sink marks on some of these chunkier bits. Again, bit of filling and sanding, job done. Blob of sprue green, you never know. And the same ejector stubs on the back. So yes, the plastic isn't that impressive, but that's not what you buy a special hobby kit for. And here is the tails, the upper and lower with the dive brakes. Again, we got a nice level of riveting, although they do fade off quite badly on that, on all those actually. But the panel lines, and we've got the little ribbed area again, and the rest of it, it's all actually fairly crisp. There's not a lot of flash on it, to be honest. I was expecting a bit more. You usually get a bit. A couple more slight sink marks, and again more of the honking great ejector stubs. So yeah. Oh, and there's the bit that fell off, is in the bottom of the bag still, so we'll leave that there for safekeeping. Put these sprues back into the bag. As I and people who build special hobby kits, you can't expect certain things. You're going to get the plastic not being perfect, there's going to be fit issues, If you're the kind of person who complains about a kit because when you glue the two sections of the tail fin together they don't perfectly line up and you've got to put clothes peg on it to clamp it, don't buy a special hobby kit. Just don't. We get two identical sprues which are the fuel tanks. As you can see, they're not small. The fly time on this without the fuel tanks I think was something like 2.5 minutes, but when you're doing 4,500 miles an hour that takes you a long way. But again, back to the fuel tanks. We've got subtle delicate panel lining, just a few bits to mount them onto the plane, and yes, the panel lines do kind of tail off around to the edges, but you're going to have a seam to deal with, you're going to be sanding it anyway, so you'd need to rescribe them. And no little pins and holes or anything, there's nothing to help you line them up, so it's all a case of lining those up by eye. Then we come to the clear part, bagged on its own. If I can figure out how to open the bag, because it's taped in about 3 different directions. Now again, special hobby clear parts normally aren't that great. You can get some that are vac moulded. This one is styrene injection moulded. Only look at that and you see through it and you go, my god, that's horrible. But the only clear sections of it are going to be the 2 windows there and there. The rest of it is going to be black. Although there is another ejector stub to get rid of in the middle, and it is thick as all heck, but if we're going to be doing it canopy closed, which I probably will, depend on how well the cockpit turns out and depending on how well the canopy fits. If it doesn't fit very well, it might well be canopy opened. So there, that's the clear part. And then we come on to the goodies. Now, this is where we may take some time, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 bags of resin and the engine, which is gorgeous. We've got the ribbing on the inside, goes all the way to the base, all the various rivety bits on the outside, and as that basically just plugs into the back of the fuselage, you're not going to need to worry about, I don't think, cutting off any of the pour block or casting plug there. So yes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, so we have lots of resin. I won't take it all out and look at it all. I think what we got, it's mainly, there are quite a bit of, I'm having problems with my teeth today, aren't I? We've got a lot of extra cockpit detail and little exterior details, and we're sticking things to the mat, like little bolts and all sorts of really fine, really nicely detailed parts. And here we have, I think that is the main construction for the rear dolly. I'll just put 1 bag's worth out for you so you can have a look. And when you're dealing with resin, you open the bag and you pull the bits out. Any little bits that drop out, put back in, because you never know, because some resin bits are really fiddly and delicate. Like that, for example. Yep, that is I think the inside of the engine. So yeah, that's going to be interesting, sawing that pour plug off. So we have the Dolly wheel or Dolly Wheels, nicely detailed with a little bit of tread on them. very crisp. Well, that might be a nose wheel, I can never tell with these things. These are definitely Dolly Wheels. Big chunky. Again, very nicely detailed. Not entirely sure what it is. Bit flashy, but we can soon clean that up. And a couple of, I'm guessing, judging by the curve on the inside of that, that's going to be where the fuel tanks mount. So we have nice rivet and panel line details down the sides, and a little flappy bit. So yeah, 4 bags worth of resin. So it'll certainly keep you busy. And the thing with special hobby kits, they're not, for what you get, they're not that expensive. If you were to buy something else and try and put all this resin etc. in as aftermarket, it'd probably cost you a small fortune, especially at 132. And the next bag of bits we have a coil of copper wire, and then we have the Decals Bag, which has also got the photo etch and the clear part in, clear acetate, sorry, for the instrument panel. Resealable bag, which I always like to see. Special hobby decals aren't actually that bad. I use the ones on the Barracuda. So let's start out looking at the little sheet. These are the stencils, I think mainly stencils for everything really. Mainly the fuel tanks, I think. And they're legible, you can read them, apart from the really tiny ones. Appear to be in register, not a lot in the way of carrier film, thin. I'll do the job. And then as we're here, we might as well have a look at the photo etch. As you can see, we got seat belts. This is pretty much all cockpit interior. So we've got the various instrument panels and main display panel, and the clear acetate, which you basically glue it in place there and paint the back white so that everything shows up. And we also have another bit there for probably that one there, yeah. So it's pretty much paint these up and then stick these behind them, keep them safe. And then we have the main decal sheet with all the main USAF markings and NASA flashes, stars and bars, and lots more warning labels. Liquid oxygen, hydrogen or dihydrogen dioxide. Yeah, not the kind of thing you'd want to be standing behind, let's put it that way, or anywhere near if it went bang. So yeah, I say the decals all look pretty nice. Obviously the big ones we've got a fair bit of carrier film, but no, that's not going to be too bad to sort out. It will be interesting though, painting it, because it was basically black, so I'll have to get creative on the paint and the weathering. Now do I zoom us back out again? Here we go. There's the bump about it. Speed record of max 6.72, which still stands today. So yeah, 4,534 mile an hour or 7,295 kilometers an hour. So yes. Yeah. Oh, wrong way. There we go. Let's zoom us back out. fitted to a pylon under the starboard wing of a B-52 Stratofortress and released at a height of 45,000 feet and a speed of 500. So we start off, we have sprue maps, breakdown of the various, they call them PUR, polyurethane resin parts, the film, the etch parts, and we're on with the assembly. And the first step is all resin and etch. And it's step 3 before we finally get on to any plastic parts. And we're still building up the cockpit. More and more detail going in. The ejector seat going together. God knows how many bits. Loads of etch, resin on that as well. Even more resin and etch going onto it. Seat going in. Instrument panels and all the various bits going on there. Oh, excuse me. Ugh. I appear to be coming down with some kind of coffee nasty thing. But then we get the fuselage halves, which the top 2 halves go together, the bottom 2 halves go together. They're telling you to attach a few bits of resin to it, but I'd stick the 2 together before I started sticking little bits of resin on. A few holes to drill out. As long as you can get those bits lined up and fitting together, it should be fairly easy going from there on. As you see, the wings are pretty simple. There's even resin parts for the tail fins. And the main tail going together. The instructions can get a little confusing as it's line drawing, and the lines they use for the arrows are the same thickness as the lines they use for the parts. So not necessarily the greatest of instructions, but you can figure them out as you go. Quite complex for the die brakes if you wanted to model it with the die brake open rather than closed. I'm not sure. So 132, so none of the bits are going to be that small. It could look quite cool open. Again, we've got more little resin sensors and gauges, etc. on the outside. Nose gear going together and in. Not much detail inside the nose bay, but we might be able to tart that up a little bit if we want. The underside tail going on with more die brake on it. And the engine nozzle, back into the engine going in, and the engine all just slotting in the back of the fuselage. Then we get the canopy going on. And the fuel tanks together, and this is what the wire's for, is so that you can plumb up the fuel tanks so that when you attach them to the plane it's all fully plumbed in. That could be interesting, trying to bend that all into the right shapes, especially as it doesn't give you any measurements. Yay, special hobby. It's not even telling you to actually drill holes to stick it in, it's just telling you to stick it to the surface, which, no, I'm going to drill holes to put it in. And yeah, carrying on with those, and then we're on to the fuel dolly, or the ground dolly, which the back end sits on. And this is all resin and wire and etch. There is no styrene parts in this at all. And then a couple of chocks to go underneath it. And a bit of a paint guide, white, red, black, yellow, iron, blue, grey, yeah. And it does give you call outs, which I'm not entirely sure. Mr. Colour and Mr. Hobby, Guns Sangyo paints, so yeah. Glue in the big bits onto the other big bits. Job done. And the paint and decal call outs, stencils, whatever you want to call them. The thing's black, right? So yeah, it's not really much of a colour call out on the actual main plane itself. We do have one option with a white underside, which I might go with. just to break up the black a little. Although I won't paint it black, it'll be either a very, very dark grey or a very, very dark blue. And then we get on to where the colour comes from, which is the fuel tanks, being the red and white quarters. With, as you see, lots of warning decals and stencils on them. Could be interesting to paint and mask those. And then on the back we get the 172 limited run plastic kits. So we've got an F86, Bell X1, D558, a Seahawk, a Hispano Aviacion, and a Mojave. So yeah, I'm not overly worried about those. So let's pop the bits back in the box and pop the lid back into shot. Yeah. There's a lot of bits. Not a lot of plastic, but there's a lot of model to build there. It'll be a definite case of being careful with the resin and making sure we don't mess anything up too badly. Oh, is there any QR code on the box? No, there isn't, just barcode. So there we go, pop that back in shot again. So that's what we get in the box with a 132 Special Hobby X15. As I've stressed, it's not an assembly model. It's not something you just stick together. There's a lot of work involved in pretty much all Special Hobby kits. They turn out awesome looking models, but they take work. And if you enjoy the painting side and the weathering side a lot more than the construction or the assembly side, yeah, maybe stick to Tamiya, Hasegawa, that kind of stuff, and don't stray too far into these kind of grounds. But if you want an X15 in 132, or pretty much in any scale, I think this is about the only one there is. I've not seen any others. There may well be. Probably a 1960s AMT or monogram or frog or something that you probably don't want to build. But there we go. So, hope you've enjoyed having a look around that. That's it. Click like and subscribe if you have. Leave any comments you want in the doobly-doo below. Enjoy your modelling. Have fun. Peace out. Rock on. Bye bye.